Yes, everybody. Welcome back to YouTube. Welcome back to ThreadmanChaza. I hope you're all doing well. We're back today with another video. I hope you enjoyed the recent video on Mason Mount and why Erik Ten Hag wants Mason Mount. All confirmed now. So Mason Mount has joined Manchester United. We're now going to do a video on ONANA. So we're going to compare. We're also going to talk a little bit about Diogo Costa as well. But it's we're mainly going to be comparing sort of ONANA to David De Gea and sort of the differences between the two different types of goalkeepers and the impact that Andre Onana could have at Manchester United if he joins. So yes, guys, please do get involved in the comments. Please do like the video if you enjoy. Please do subscribe if you're new. But let's get into it. So what we're going to do is we're going to break down shot stopping, distribution, sort of stopping crosses or claiming crosses, and also sweeping. So we're going to talk about those four main attributes. So these are the these are the sort of data values from FBref, so FBref. So it's sort of a website where you can sort of compare stats of different players, and they rank these stats in percentiles, right? So these percentiles. So you'll see like a red bar. A very red bar is a bad thing. A more of a less darker red is getting a little bit better, and then you've got sort of a greyish is sort of in the middle. And as you get more sort of to a lighter green, that's a good level. And as you get more to a sort of a darker green and a bigger number towards 100, that means the goalkeeper ranks higher, sort of in that metric, right? So this is just the introductory little graphic. We're not going to compare them on these graphics too much, but you can see just from looking at these early graphics, you can see Diogo Costa has got the most green areas, followed by Andre Onana, and then followed by David De Gea. All right, so we can already see quite a big difference there. Okay, the clean sheet percentage is green for all of them. Obviously, that's mostly also down to the way the team's defending, the way the team's playing, the way the manager wants to play, etc. So we won't read too much into that, but we're going to look at the other attributes now. So let's start with. I'm just going to bring myself down to this left-hand corner here. Okay, so let's start with Andre Onana in terms of distribution then. So there's lots and lots of examples, and this analysis has also been released on Twitter. So if you go to ThreadmanChaza, if you want to look at more of a written breakdown of this, if you go to my Twitter page, you can see that there. It's also on my Substack. Where I write my articles, it's also in article form on there. So I've released my content in 3 different places, trying to cater to everybody's preferences. So you'll see in the article form, you'll see some more specific examples of what I'm talking about. But I'm sure you guys remember from last season, Manchester United had a lot of problems when we tried to build up from the back. Wasn't just down to David De Gea, it was also down to that lack of midfielder who can drop in comfortably and play on the half turn, etc. And a few of our defenders who are not so comfortable on the ball in deeper areas. But we know from last season, right, those first 2 games, Brighton and Brentford, Manchester United really struggled to play out from the back. There was a couple of examples in the Brighton game where we had Fred. If you remember, guys, from pre-season, we played with sort of a staggered 3 in midfield. So we had Fred, who was the 6, McTominay, who was sort of more of an 8, and then Bruno, who was sort of the highest 8 or number 10. So that's what we were doing in pre-season, and that's the structure that Ten Hag used in the first game against Brighton. So Fred was the number 6, and we all know Fred is not a number 6. But Erik Ten Hag was using Fred in that position simply because I think he wanted McTominay in a slightly more advanced area. We know Scott McTominay's sort of strengths in terms of driving through midfield, arriving late in the box, things like that. So we had to use Fred as the 6. And against Brighton, there were many examples of De Gea playing the ball into Fred losing the ball, and Brighton nearly scoring. And throughout the whole game, Brighton's sort of diamond in midfield completely caused loads of issues for Fred and McTominay in midfield in terms of when United tried to build up, right? And then we all know the Brentford game, that pass into Eriksen, and Eriksen lost the ball and Brentford scored. So Brighton and Brentford were a complete calamity. So what did Erik Ten Hag do? He looked to play more long balls. So he instructed David De Gea. I've got the exact number. You'll see the exact number of long balls, the comparison in the article. I break down game by game for the first few games how many longer balls De Gea played between game 1, game 2, game 3, game 4, etc. And you'll see there's a huge difference. I believe, don't quote me on this exactly, but it's somewhere around, in the Brighton and Brentford game, De Gea made around 7 to 10 long balls, and then in the Liverpool game, the game after, it was 20 plus. I'm sure it was at least 20 something. So it was almost around it was around 3 times more. So there was a clear ploy: do not play out for the back. We can't do it comfortably. Why? Because De Gea isn't comfortable at doing it. We had Fred and McTominay who aren't comfortable at doing it as well. So why is this an issue for Manchester United? Why don't we just keep playing longer balls? Because we can't play out from the back, right? So let's just keep playing longer balls. Well, the issue we have at Manchester United is that, number one, David De Gea's longer passes over a distance of more than 40 yards, and we'll talk about this soon. They're not the most accurate. Issue 2, Manchester United do not have many players who are comfortable at holding the ball up or playing on the half turn when fast passes are fizzed into them. So therefore, I think with the profiles we have, particularly in defence, in terms of Shaw and Martinez, I think there's a lot of work that we could do to improve our build-up play, and I think Andre Onana would do that. Okay, so what does Andre Onana do? So the first thing that Onana can do is he can allow you to outnumber an opposition press. So you'll see here, Inter are playing Atalanta. They happen to be 2-0 up after 6 minutes, but that's not really that important in this particular circumstance. In this circumstance, Inter, if you know Inter, they play with a back three, right? So during build-up, they've obviously got, they normally have sort of their 3 centre-backs and Onana all involved. So that allows Inter a lot of times to generate sort of a 4 in their first line of build-up. So this here outnumbers Atalanta's press of 3. Okay, so Andre Onana, you'll see his positioning there. He's actually ahead of the right-sided centre-back. So he's in a really advanced area. And what does that do? It makes it really, really hard if you're pressing Inter. Firstly, it makes it hard before a game to sort of sit down with the coaches and think, how are we gonna stop Andre Onana? How are we gonna stop X, Y, or Z team, whoever Onana's playing for, building up from the back? Because this guy's literally taking up a centre-back position. He's that comfortable on the ball. If we press him, he's just going to play it around us. So what do we actually do? And I've watched a lot of games from into the season, and teams that do press Onana, now and again, he will make a mistake because he is a bit crazy, right? So expect him to make a mistake now and again. But the most important thing is, more often than not, most of the time, his distribution is very, very good. And this high position that he takes up during build-up, or during sort of settled possession, whatever it may be, he's taken up very, very high positions. And that allows his team to outnumber an opposition press. And he literally does, we talk about this sort of factor about sort of the 11th outfield player, and he literally embodies that sort of sentiment, right? So Onana adds an extra number to your build-up structure, okay? So here's another example here. You see Onana still in a reasonably high position. They're obviously in their own box, but you see that Atlanta are pressing with sort of a 2, and then you've got one Atlanta player sort of behind that 2 on the midfield player of, I think it's the midfield player. It might be a centre-back, more of an advanced player of Inter anyway. But you'll see that Inter, they've also got the left-back who's also open as well. So when you've got Onana in your build-up structure, and we talk about David De Gea sort of last season, it makes a huge difference if you have a keeper that can add an extra number to your build-up, or if you have a keeper that doesn't add an extra number to your build-up. It can cause positive and negative. It can cause massive positive and negative impacts on the team, right? So Andre Onana, we've seen Manchester United this season sort of build up, sort of last season build up in lots of different shapes and structures. But Andre Onana instantly adds another player to that build-up. So it makes it very, very difficult for a team that wants to press to cause any issues. What does that do? Well, that can actually force a team back, right? That can force a team back. So if let's say I was a manager for a random club, and I had a game against Manchester United next weekend, I'm going to sit down and analyze, right, how can I cause problems for Manchester United during their build-up. And I'm looking, Manchester United, let's say they do sign ONANA. They've got ONANA, they've got Martinez, and they've got Shaw, who are probably the three most comfortable during build-up. They've got Varane, who's not as comfortable, but what Varane does, he circulates the ball quite quickly, and he doesn't take too many chances. So Varane knows his capabilities on the ball, and he just moves it quickly. So he doesn't take too many risks, so that's okay for us. But if I was an opposition manager, I'd be looking and thinking, ooh, I might not engage Manchester United actually all too highly. What I might do is I might look at Manchester United's midfield. Maybe if you look at their midfield, Casemiro, Bruno, and Mount, let's say, okay, maybe one of those midfield three. I'll look at that midfield three. At least one of those midfield three isn't too comfortable under pressure with their back to goal on the half turn. So maybe I'll press there instead. So you might see teams sitting off Manchester United a little bit more, and that obviously allows Manchester United a lot more control from the back. So that's a big reason why Erik Ten Hag wants Andre Onana. Okay, so this is the launched pass completion percentage of Onana, De Gea, and Diogo Costa. Okay, so this includes passes longer than 40 yards. So you'll often see these passes, you'll often see fullbacks or wingbacks in very advanced areas on the touchline. Those sort of passes from goalkeepers, those clip passes out to fullbacks or wingbacks, or passes into midfielders. So that's the type of passes we're talking about here. We're not talking about shorter passes. Okay, so we're talking about longer passes. So Onana's pass completion. So start with De Gea. De Gea's pass completion is 31.3. So that's in the bottom 17% of all goalkeepers in the top leagues in the last year or so. Onana's is 10% higher, more or less. So 41%, which is in the top 25%, and Diogo Costa's is 44%, so in the top 5%. So obviously in this video, I'm going to focus mostly on Onana because that's the goalkeeper that's most likely to come to Manchester United. But in terms of distribution, in terms of taking up high positions, okay, Onana's got it. In terms of distribution, okay, Onana's got it. But Diogo Costa is on another level altogether in terms of these launch passes, right? So if Manchester United wanted to look at who the best goalkeeper is on the market, who can play these launch passes, it would be Diogo Costa. But I think Andre Onana is a lot more. There's a lot more chance of that happening rather than Costa, right? We've seen a lot of links to Costa in the past, but in the last few weeks we've seen links more to Onana. So that's just a quick comparison. Andre Onana would be a huge upgrade on David De Gea on the ball, but Diogo Costa would, although it's only 3 and a bit percent, Diogo Costa's in the top 5%. Okay, guys, so let's move on to look at Pep Guardiola. Okay, so Pep Guardiola, before the Champions League final, Pep Guardiola said the following. So he said, Onana makes it really difficult to deploy a high press against. You cannot press the goalkeeper properly. Exactly what I talked about, right? So one of the best managers in the world, or the best man, whatever you think about Pep Guardiola, right? I know he gets a lot of criticism, but he is sort of a revolutionary figure in the game. He has talked about this goalkeeper being incredibly difficult to press, right? And if you're a team that likes to press high and sees a lot of value in pressing high, and that's your philosophy, we want to press high, we want to win the ball back in high areas, and we want to score goals from those sort of high regains, the best manager in the world, let's say, says that this is very, very difficult against Andre Onana. And he also talks about the rest of the team, right? So what good, people might be thinking watching this video, what good is Andre Onana if he plays a great pass and the person who's on the end of it, whoever it may be, doesn't control it well? And that's a great point. That's a great point. And Pep Guardiola talked about this as well. So he talked about the likes of Martinez, Dzeko, Lukaku. We know Dzeko and Lukaku, with their back to goal, they're strong players, they're good, decent hold-up play, right? So that is also a difficult thing when you're coming up against Onana with these longer launch passes that you can play. If you've got somebody who can hold the ball up, very, very difficult to stop. You can't press them high too much because Onana's fantastic. His passing range is brilliant. His accuracy is generally very, very good. The technical ability he's got, his technique's good. So Onana's going to pick out good passes. He's going to find the right pass selection. Generally, he's going to find that right pass selection. on the majority of occasions. But even if you sit a little bit deeper, if you play that ball longer, right? So it's not just if you press him. If you play that ball longer and you sit a bit deeper, and Onana plays a longer pass up to a big striker who can win a flick on or can hold the ball up, they've got so many different ways of playing. And Pep Guardiola talked a little bit about Manchester United sort of running onto these longer passes, and it's different because Inter keep the ball well and Manchester United can't. So this is the thing that I've mentioned on the thread and the article. I've talked about how Manchester United keep the ball when Onana does play these quite fizzy and speedy passes, right? There's a lot of whip on these passes. So there's a lot of criticism that Manchester United players got last season. I think David De Gea was one of those in terms of his longer passes were a lot of times just giving the ball back to the opposition. But also we've got to look at the outfield players not challenging for duels, not using their strength well enough, being too weak in challenges. And this is certainly an area where Manchester United can improve when the ball does go up to those players. So I've talked about in the article and the thread, Manchester United obviously need to sign a striker. We know Manchester United need to sign a striker who can at least be better than what we've got at the moment at holding the ball up and challenging for these duels in the air. Another thing I talked about was about Mason Mount. So Mason Mount can play quite well on the half turn. So if Onana fizzes a ball into Casemiro, I know Casemiro's strengths are not playing on the half turn, not turning particularly quickly away from pressure. I know Casemiro is not going to do that regularly. Bruno Fernandes, now and again, he might do it. Mason Mount is probably the best of those three players at playing on the half turn. So Mason Mount can receive more often on the. I'm not saying he's Frankie de Jong level, but not in his own defensive third, but in the middle third of the pitch. Mason Mount can receive more on the half turn. If a ball is whipped into him, he's probably slightly better than Bruno or Casemiro would be in that instance. I think Rashford still needs to improve with his back to goal. I think he improved certain elements of that last season. I think Anthony, Garnacho, Sancho, wherever it may be, I think all of the attacking players need to improve their upper body strength a little bit more so they can sort of shrug off defenders and receive on the half turn and turn, right? That's something that Martial does quite well, although I don't think Martial is going to stay. And that's, the right decision if we do let him go. But that's certainly a good point to mention. So I agree. I'm not just saying Andre Onana is going to transform everybody else. In terms of how they keep the ball. We also need players to keep the ball better. And I think a striker will improve that. And I think Mason Mount a little bit better on the half turn than what we've got. All right. Okay, let's look at crosses stop then. So we've talked about distribution now. Let's look at crosses stop. So David De Gea is one of the he's one of the worst. Okay. He is one of the worst at stopping crosses. All right. So David De Gea is in the 9th percentile. All right. So that means that there's only 9% of goalkeepers, around 9% of goalkeepers in the last year or so that have claimed fewer crosses. All right, than David De Gea. So David De Gea does not command his area. If a cross is coming in, he tends to stay on his line. Andre Onana is more, again, just like we said with I think we talked about the pass completion being about 10% better. The crosses stopped is sort of twice as good, right? So Onana is twice as good in that metric. So Onana is a lot higher. And again, Diogo Costa ranks the top out of the three. Interesting enough, it's important to mention, having watched a lot of Inter, you can't just look at the stats, you've also got to use your eyes. Having watched a lot of Inter, and we'll talk about this when we come to sweeping as well, Inter Milan play with three quite dominant centre-backs. I'm sure you've watched some of Inter at least last season, playing with three at the back. So a lot of crosses that do come in, the centre-backs deal with them. All right, the centre-backs deal. A lot of crosses that come in, they sit with quite a more of a deeper block at times, and the centre-backs deal with those crosses. So I think there's scope for Onana's figure to rise even more. I really do, especially with Lisandro Martinez in the team. He's better in the air than a lot of people sort of talk about, I believe, but there's still going to be instances where Lisandro Martinez gets beat in the air, right? Everyone's going to get beat in the air, but particularly Martinez, there will be times where he struggles. So with ONANA, I think there'll be more scope for him to come out and dominate his box. That's something that he likes to do. In terms of claiming, there's a lot of times where he goes up and sort of parries the ball. He takes all the defenders out with him, brilliant, or all the attackers. He just comes out and punches. I've seen some people sort of, say, is that a problem that he doesn't come out and catch the ball? But a lot of his parries are quite good. I've got no real concern there with Andre Onana. Parries the ball reasonably well, even if he doesn't catch it. It's just about stopping that cross, sort of stopping a dangerous situation, right? Again, Diogo Costa would be the best of the three in that metric. But it's a very, very important thing to be able to do, to take pressure off your defenders. And also, if you are catching a cross, and the opposition put a lot of players forward, imagine the counter-attacking opportunities you then have, right? We've seen lots of examples in the last few seasons of Alisson coming out and claiming or coming out and dominating his box, and then he plays that really long, he takes that long goal kick, he sort of volleys it, and Salah runs onto it. I think that's the way Liverpool actually scored against us when they beat us 2-0 a few years ago. Sort of a goalkeeper that comes and claims or comes and parries, and that can actually set you on the counter-attack. A lot of times, if De Gea is staying on his line, he's waiting for things to happen. He gets the ball eventually. By the time he gets the ball, the other team's got some chance to get their players back into position, right? There is obviously times, and people will be saying, oh, what about the times where it leads to you conceding a goal, right? Some goalkeepers come out and try and punch the ball or come and catch the ball, and they misjudge the height of the ball or misjudge the flight of it. They don't jump quickly enough, or they jump too soon. And obviously, the opposition can score. The goalie's no longer in his goal. Obviously, that happens to every goalkeeper. Now and again, you will make the odd error. But overall, it's going to be a much, much, much bigger net positive than it is a net negative. So sweeping. So we've seen Erik ten Hag this season use a lot of different structures. We know 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3 he's used in the past in terms of when you look at the team sheet, but we know on the pitch it looks a lot different. So we know on the pitch sometimes we use sort of a 2-3, more often sort of a 3-2 or a 3-1 when we're building up from the back. And you can see here there's lots of 5s and 6s going on in terms of our last line of attack. So we push a lot of bodies into the final third. That's obviously very, very that obviously leaves you very, very vulnerable to counterattacks, right? When we use these very, very adventurous structures in possession, counterattacks are obviously a big, big weakness, right? When you go to Anfield, when you go to the Etihad, in previous seasons when you've gone to the Etihad, really, you'll hit Liverpool and City on the counter. A lot of teams can cause those sort of teams problems on the counter-attack. It's a bit more difficult with City now with the structure they employ, using more wide centre-backs who are very, very physical in duels. But when you do sort of push a fullback into midfield, and if your rest defence structure, so if your structure, when you're in possession, what does your defense, if you lose the ball when you're in possession, and then you lose the ball, what is your structure defensively? If your structure isn't quite right, that can obviously leave you vulnerable to counter-attack. So what do you need when that happens? Ideally, when you're looking to play a high line and overload bodies into the final third, into the opposition's half, you need a goalkeeper who is very, very... you need a goalkeeper who is extremely comfortable at coming out and sweeping anything up that might come along. Right, so this is interesting. So David De Gea actually ranks okay. So this is the average distance of defensive actions, right? So the bigger the number, the higher up the pitch the goalkeeper is coming out of their goal to, sweep or stop an opposition counter-attack. So David De Gea is actually ranking reasonably highly. Diogo Costa, obviously, again in the top, sort of in the top bracket. However, Andre Onana is ranking sort of, really, there's only 10%, so he's in the bottom, really, there's only 10% of goalkeepers that rank lower than Andre Onana. So you might be thinking, well, what's going on here exactly? What's going on here? So, important to mention, that this is due to Inter Milan's system. Okay, so Andre Onana is not coming out of his goal and sweeping because he's afraid to or he can't do it. This is because Inter Milan. This is because of their certain tactics that they use. I've watched a lot of Inter games this season. A lot of their games, they're not looking to press and engage incredibly highly in a lot of games. They're looking to sit back more often and sort of soak up pressure. So that means Andre Onana is always closest to his goal anyway. Okay? More of a compact block. So Onana's Ajax numbers for Ajax. So his Ajax numbers in the Eredivisie, he was in the top 5% in 2021, and then in the Champions League. So even when you're playing against top opponents, he was still in the top 44%. Right, so he was still up there, doing it on a decent level for Ajax against very, very difficult opponents in the Champions League. And obviously, I've said here, against the stronger opponents, you might more often play a deeper line. So there is potential there for him to play in a higher line and sweep that these figures tell us. So very important to look at the figures from his Ajax days as well to suggest to us, okay, he's not sweeping as actively recently for Inter because of the system that they use, but he has got the potential to sweep much, much higher for Ajax under Erik ten Hag. And it's not just the Eredivisie numbers. Obviously, they're going to be much higher because Ajax are going to be playing against weaker opponents, but also in the Champions League against the toughest of opponents. And in that particular season, Ajax were playing, big teams in the Champions League. And I'm actually going to get the names of those teams up here so I can show you. He can still sweep to a decent level, right? He can still sweep to a decent level. So where are we? Ajax. So I really wanted to put this stat in because I thought it was very, very important, just to show really how there is potential there for Onana to do it to a decent level. Oh yeah, so Ajax were playing. They had Liverpool and Atalanta in their group. So yeah, that was actually quite a difficult group for them. Atalanta are, a decent European team. So they had Atalanta and Liverpool in their group. So that's why that figure was a little bit lower. But it's important to know he has the potential to do so. Okay. Okay, let me move myself back up to the top. Okay, so this is a graphic from Mark R Stats on Twitter. So Mark R Stats. So this is from his website. He's a very, very good resource to have. This shows lots of different comparisons of different teams from the 2022-23 season, from last Premier League season. And Manchester United, if you count through, Manchester United had the 14th deepest defensive line out of all of the Premier League teams last season. So you've got Manchester City first, Arsenal second, Liverpool third, Brighton fourth, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th Manchester United ranked in the defensive line height for last season. So you might be thinking, well, why is that so? Well, if you think about sort of the way that Manchester United sort of changed throughout the season last season, after those first two games, Manchester United found a way against the likes of Liverpool. I think Liverpool was a bit different because it was at home. We played with quite a lot of intensity. In the second half, we dropped off a little bit more. But against Arsenal at home, against Leicester away, Southampton away, we went on that little good spell of form. And in those games, Manchester United played much more of a sort of a mid-block. Our defensive line was much, much deeper. We used Varane and Martinez, who were brilliant in sort of defending the box. Casemiro came in after those games as well. We used Malacia a few times as well. We were much more intent. We used Elanga as well at times. We were much more intent. McTominay played. We were much more intent on sort of keeping it tight at the back, trying to keep a clean sheet, trying to keep goals out. Because we know that we can't play out from the back consistently due to the goalkeeper and the midfielders we had, right? So, but this was from the whole season. So you'll see generally, and it's not It's not exactly, but generally where you finish in the league somewhat corresponds around to where your defensive line height is. I know there's a few anomalies. But obviously you've got City, who won the league, Arsenal, who finished second. You've got Liverpool, who ended up finishing, I think it was fifth. Brighton sort of sixth. Newcastle finished fourth, I think. So you'll see a lot of these teams. There's a few anomalies, but you'll see a lot of these teams who were in, particularly the top 6 or 7 who finished sort of in those Champions League and Europa League places last season. A lot of those teams feature with the highest defensive lines here. But even relegated Leicester had a higher defensive line than Manchester United last season. So that just shows you how Erik ten Hag had to compromise last season. And I think Erik ten Hag, if we do sign Andre Onana, Erik ten Hag will want to see that value rise up more towards at least sort of the 45 level. I'm not sure exactly on like what the metric is, how they're measuring it, or what the measurement is they're using, right? But that doesn't matter too much because it's all standardized. But I imagine Erik ten Hag will want to move Manchester United up to at least the Brentford, Chelsea, Newcastle level next season. All right, so let's watch his space. We'll come back in a year's time and see how we rank. But I think he'll want to do at least that. And I think using Andre Onana as a goalkeeper will allow us to do that because David De Gea is not comfortable coming out of his box and sort of sweeping, challenging, acting as almost another defender. His starting position isn't naturally isn't high enough, although he improved on it last season slightly. He's just not proactive enough. So signing Onana should allow us to increase this further. You've also obviously got to be able to play a high line. You've got to be able to have defenders and centre-backs who are comfortable at playing that high line. And I think at times last season, Manchester United centre-backs struggled in wider areas from time to time. I think Martinez had good and bad moments in there. Varane, again, had good and bad moments. But I think that because of the way that Manchester United will look to counter-press more often from higher areas next season, with Mason Mount coming into the team, I think Manchester United will stop more opposition attacks or opposition periods of possession higher up the pitch. So I don't think it will get to the situation where we have centre-backs and full-backs isolated as often. So that's how I think Erik ten Hag will look to go. Okay, this is another graphic. Lots of graphics to show you guys. So let's go to shot stopping. I know shot stopping is a very, very important metric. And I know a lot of people will be thinking, it's taken that long to get to shot stopping. But I think the first 3 metrics, distribution, cross stopping or stopping crosses or claiming crosses and sweeping, are the 3 main areas that David De Gea is really, really weak in. If we look at sort of shot stopping, you'll see here, this is a graph that looks at expected goals on target minus goals conceded. So this basically tells us how many goals did a goalkeeper's shot stopping prevent, right? So how good is your shot stopping? So you'll see when David De Gea first came to Manchester United, so in that sort of 2011, 2012 season, so the first sort of bar there, you'll see it was, around 7 or 8 goals, and then it went down to about 6, and then down to about 1, and then up to 5. And you'll see in that 17-18 season, David De Gea, for me, was probably the best goalkeeper. He's 100%, I'm sure he was the best shot stopper in the world during that season, statistically. But also on the eye, for people who don't like statistics, I think we could all agree David De Gea was at the top of his game there, and the statistics agree, right? Literally preventing, 13, 14 goals just through his shot stopping. I mean, that is the difference between finishing, that's the difference between finishing, sort of around the Europa League places, Champions League places, and finishing sort of mid-table. It's a big, big difference. But we can see ever since that season, David De Gea struggled with his shot stopping, right? So his levels decreased. And I think this matches the eye test, right? Because we know David De Gea has made a lot of bad mistakes. There's lots to go over. We can talk about sort of, I've mentioned here, sort of Brentford this season, West Ham, Everton in the Cup. lots of goals that should have been saved and plenty more down the years. There's lots of magnificent saves he's made, but because he's made so many blunders and because he does not offer the attributes that the other two goalkeepers I mentioned do, he doesn't make up for mistakes in shot stopping with other metrics, right? With other attributes. So David De Gea is no longer a fantastic shot stopper. I think the eye test proves that as well. Now and again, he can make a very, very good save, but he just makes far too many blunders in big moments. And this metric here, so I'm going to go back up to the top. This metric here tells us the post-shot expected goals minus the goals against. So again, this tells us per game how many shots is a certain goalkeeper stopping going in the back of the net based on their shot stopping, right? So how many goals are they preventing through how good they are with their shot stopping? And you'll see here via FBref, David De Gea is only sort of stopping 0.02 per game. So that's very, very minimal. If obviously if you times that by 50, that obviously gives you one goal prevented in total. So that really over a full season is not really going to really benefit your team too much. But if you look at Diogo Costa, 0.18 per game, that means every 5-6 games, that man is preventing a goal through some brilliant shot stopping. The same with Andre Onana, 0.013. Again, what's that? Sort of every 6-7 games. I'd say probably 7 games. Yeah, it'd be 7, wouldn't it? So every sort of 7 games, he's making that big save to prevent a goal. So it's also important when you look at these stats to look at the difficulty of the shots that the goalkeepers are getting. I totally get that. But shot stopping nowadays in football is not as important as it used to be. And I know people would say, oh, come on, the first job of a goalkeeper is always to shot stops. I think the way that football has changed in recent years, people are now looking at shot prevention rather than shot stopping. So shot prevention via the metrics we looked at before, sort of the indicators in terms of sweeping, stopping crosses, claiming crosses. Can you prevent a shot from even coming in the first place by being proactive? Yes, you will make mistakes. Andre Onana, if he comes in, I'm going to say this now in this video, he's going to make some mistakes. 100%. Alisson last season, statistically, was by quite a way, I think, the best goalkeeper in the league. He was unbelievable for Liverpool last season, Alisson. But if you watch that Liverpool versus Real Madrid game in Anfield, do you remember the mistakes that he made in that game? Alisson made a lot of mistakes last season, but do you know what? He makes up for those mistakes because of how generally proactive he is and how he gets 98% of things right rather than getting things wrong. If you rely solely on your shot stopping, and you have done over many, many years, and then your shot stopping, the level of your shot stopping decreases, you no longer have any value. If, like Onana, I think Onana is a decent shot stopper. I don't think Onana is a brilliant shot stopper. I think he's a decent shot stopper. I think his reflexes are okay. I think he gets to sort of a lot of the saves I've seen from Onana. He gets to sort of towards the top corner very well and gets a fingertip save to it. I think his reflexes are good. I think his reach is quite good when he's sort of diving. I think that's a good part of his game. But I don't think Onana is a world-class shot stopper by any stretch. He's nowhere near as good as Alisson is with his shot stopping, by the way. That's what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is because of the other attributes he can offer, I think he'd have a huge impact on Manchester United. And yeah, reunion. So could Andre Onana be the third former Ajax player to join Ten Hag at Manchester United? I'm talking in terms of that's played with Ten Hag before, because I know Christian Eriksen has played for Ajax, but he didn't play for Ajax under Ten Hag, right? So could Onana be the third, along with Martinez and Anthony, Ajax player to join Ten Hag at Manchester United for a reunion? He's described Onana as a masterful goalkeeper. He is a keeper with great qualities in the past. And I've talked about the fact here that Ten Hag seems to bring players to a club that he knows and he trusts. So could Andre Onana be Manchester United's next signing in the transfer window? When this video comes out, he might already be a Manchester United player. But what do you guys think in the comments? Do you guys think we should bring Andre Onana to the club? If you want to see the written version of this analysis, please go to ThreadmanChaza on Twitter. If you want to see the article form of this analysis, please go to ThreadmanChaza on Substack. You will see the links to all of this in the description. You'll see the links to all of these on my Twitter as well, on my link tree on Twitter. I really appreciate all the support. This has been a long video. I can't include too many videos in YouTube videos because of sort of like copyright stuff, but I hope you still enjoy sort of the images and the graphics. I hope they were useful. And please do always like and subscribe if you are new. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I appreciate all the support, guys. We'll be back soon, hopefully, with another video about sort of a striker. Hopefully Manchester United get linked to sort of a striker, and we can do some analysis on a striker. Thanks a lot, guys. Take care.